The studio lights burned bright, illuminating the sleek modern set of The Ethan Blake Show. The audience, a mix of political enthusiasts and wrestling fans, filled the rows of seats. The live countdown on the massive monitor ticked down. 3, 2, 1. The opening music played, and the camera panned across the audience before zooming in on the host's confident smirk. Ethan Blake, a well-known liberal TV host, adjusted his tie, ready to make a spectacle out of his guest. And sitting across from him, looking completely unbothered, was Hulk Hogan. Hogan sat with his arms crossed, his massive frame dominating the chair. Though he wasn't in a wrestling ring, he could already tell this was going to be a fight. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ethan said with his polished TV voice, "tonight we have a very special guest, a man who has dominated professional wrestling for decades, a household name, and now apparently a political commentator." A few chuckles from the audience. Ethan grinned, pleased with himself. "Please welcome Hulk Hogan." A mix of cheers and a few hesitant claps filled the room. Hogan simply nodded. "Thanks for having me, brother." Ethan leaned forward, folding his hands in mock curiosity. "Hulk," he began, "you've always been a big personality, but lately your name has been making headlines. Not for wrestling, but for your very, let's call them, strong political beliefs." Hogan smirked. He could already see where this was going. "You're a vocal Trump supporter, and I just have to ask, when did you decide to stop being a wrestling legend and start being Trump's puppet?" A wave of gasps and laughter rippled through the audience. Hogan's smirk didn't fade. He cracked his knuckles and leaned in slightly, his deep voice carrying across the studio. "Let me tell you something, brother," he said, keeping his tone even but firm. "I've never been anyone's puppet. I don't follow people. I follow what I believe in. Always have, always will." Ethan let out a mock gasp. "Oh, really? So you're telling me that it's just a coincidence that everything you say sounds like it came straight out of Trump's mouth?" Hogan let out a short chuckle, shaking his head. "Ethan, let me ask you something, brother. If I agree with my own beliefs, and Trump just happens to share some of those beliefs, does that make me his puppet? Or does that just mean I have a mind of my own?" The audience murmured, some nodding in agreement. Ethan wasn't backing down. "All right, Hulk, let's test that. Tell me something. Do you support everything Trump says and does?" Hogan shrugged. "Nope." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "Really?" Hogan nodded. "That's right, brother. I'm my own man. But let me ask you something." Ethan smirked, gesturing dramatically. "Oh, please, go ahead." Hogan tilted his head. "Do you support everything Biden does?" The audience burst into laughter and applause. Ethan's confident smile wavered. "Well, that's different," Hogan chuckled. "Oh, I bet it is, brother." Ethan cleared his throat, quickly regaining his composure. "All right, let's cut to the real issue. You claim you have your own beliefs, but Hulk, let's be real. You're a wrestler, not a politician. What makes you think you know anything about politics?" Hogan's expression didn't change. "You know, Ethan, that's a funny thing to say," he mused, tapping his fingers on the table. "Because last time I checked, you're not a politician either. You're a TV host." The audience erupted into laughter. A few people even stood up and clapped. Ethan's jaw tensed. "Well, unlike you, I actually have a degree in political science." Hogan nodded. "And yet you still don't get it, brother. A fancy degree doesn't mean you understand the real world. I've spent my life traveling this country, talking to real, hard-working Americans. I know what they care about, not because I read it in a book, but because I lived it." The crowd cheered again, some shouting, "Tell him, Hogan!" Ethan's face turned red. He needed to regain control of the conversation. "Okay," he said, forcing a chuckle. "Let's stop dancing around the issue. The truth is, Hulk, you're just another celebrity who jumped into politics for attention. You're not here because you care about the country. You're here because Trump made you relevant again." Hogan's expression darkened slightly. "You think I need Trump to be relevant, brother?" he asked, his voice steady but firm. Ethan smirked. "I think that without Trump, no one would care what Hulk Hogan has to say anymore." The audience gasped. For the first time, Hogan's smile faded. He leaned in close, locking eyes with Ethan. The playful tone was gone. His voice, gravelly and serious, cut through the tension like a knife. "I've been fighting my whole life, brother," Hogan said, "in and out of the ring. I built my career with my own two hands. Nobody tells me what to do, and nobody tells me what to think. I support Trump because I believe in the things he stands for. Law and order, American jobs, strength, not because he told me to." Ethan opened his mouth, but Hogan wasn't finished. "You sit here in your nice suit, in this cozy studio, acting like you know the struggles of real Americans?" Hogan continued. "But tell me, Ethan, when was the last time you actually listened to the people you claim to represent?" Ethan blinked. Hogan smirked. "That's what I thought." The audience erupted again, and this time even Ethan knew he was losing control. He straightened his papers, clearing his throat. "All right, Hulk, that's all well and good, but let me ask you this. Do you think your fans will still love you now that you've picked a side?" Hogan stared at him for a moment. Then he turned directly to the camera. "My fans. They know who I am. They respect me because I stand for something." The crowd exploded into applause. Ethan gritted his teeth. This wasn't how the interview was supposed to go. Hogan, seeing his frustration, chuckled and leaned back. "You wanted to embarrass me on national TV, brother," Hogan said, "but the only person looking foolish right now is you." The audience was electric. A mix of laughter, applause, and even a few standing ovations rippled through the studio. Hulk Hogan sat tall, his arms crossed, a victorious smirk creeping onto his face. Across from him, Ethan Blake was seething. His carefully planned ambush had backfired spectacularly. Ethan shuffled his note cards, trying to regain control. "All right, Hulk, you've made your position loud and clear, but let's get real. You talk about real Americans and their struggles, but what do you actually know about struggle?" The room went quiet. Hogan's expression hardened. He sat forward, resting his forearms on the table. "Struggle?" he repeated, his deep voice carrying an unmistakable edge. "Brother, you ever grow up with nothing? You ever walk into a wrestling gym with $5 to your name, praying you'll get a shot? You ever fight your way to the top, only to be torn down by the same media that once cheered for you?" Ethan blinked, not expecting the turn in the conversation. "Let me tell you something," Hogan continued, his voice unwavering. "I've been broke. I've been betrayed. I've been torn apart by the press more times than I can count. And every single time, I got back up. Because that's what fighters do. That's what Americans do." The crowd roared in approval. Ethan forced a smile, but it looked painful. He was losing control. Again. "Well," he said, clearing his throat, "that's a lovely speech, but let's not pretend you're some kind of blue-collar hero. You live in a mansion. You have millions of dollars. You have nothing in common with the average working-class American." Hogan tilted his head, amusement flashing in his eyes. "Let me ask you something, Ethan," he said smoothly. "How much do you make doing this show?" The question hit like a sledgehammer. The audience murmured. Ethan's smile froze. Well, that's irrelevant," Ethan stammered. Hogan chuckled. "I'll take that as a lot." The audience burst into laughter. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Okay, that's not the point." "Oh, it's exactly the point, brother," Hogan said. "You sit here in this multi-million-dollar studio, dressed in a custom suit, acting like you're the voice of the people. But when was the last time you actually talked to them?" Ethan opened his mouth, and nothing came out. "You see, Ethan," Hogan continued, his tone cool, "the difference between you and me is I never forgot where I came from. I don't talk down to people because they don't have a fancy degree. I don't mock them because they have different opinions. I respect them, brother." More applause, more cheers. Ethan's face was turning bright red. His usual tactics weren't working. He had one last trick up his sleeve. He let out a mock sigh. "You know what, Hulk? I get it. You're a big, tough guy. But let's be real. Isn't your time up?" The audience gasped. Ethan smiled, sensing an opening. "I mean, wrestling is a young man's game. The world is changing. People have moved on. Maybe, just maybe, it's time for you to do the same." The silence was deafening. Hogan leaned forward, locking eyes with Ethan. "Brother," he said slowly, If the world had really moved on, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. The audience exploded in cheers. Hogan wasn't finished. "You say my time is up?" he said. "Let me tell you something. Real Americans don't just move on from their beliefs. They don't just roll over because the media tells them to. They fight for what they believe in. And as long as I'm breathing, I'm going to fight for them." The crowd went wild. Ethan's face was pure defeat. Hogan stood up, towering over the host. He unclipped his microphone, set it gently on the table, and smirked. "You wanted to embarrass me on national TV, brother," he said. "But the only person looking foolish right now is you." Ethan sat there, speechless, as Hogan turned to the audience, raised his hand in a casual wave, and walked off the set. The show's producers scrambled. The audience gave a standing ovation. That night, the interview went viral. Millions watched as Hulk Hogan stood his ground, refusing to be bullied. And while the media tried to spin it as Hogan being out of touch, the people, they saw the truth. Hulk Hogan had won again, and this time, he didn't even have to throw a punch. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that inspire and challenge us to grow. What would you have done if you were in his shoes? Let us know in the comments below.